We are the first design build, I think. I'm pretty sure we're up there for a design build. A lot of these companies are doing these, but they're offering them as upgrades for condos. We're saying, no, we're not going to offer as upgrades. It's going to be built into the performer, to the price. And all of our bachelor units are outfitted with the three pieces, which is
Welcome back to another episode of Keeping It Real Estate. Today's guest is Benjamin Julius. And in 2017, Ben was feeling lost in the professional world. So he and his wife leveraged everything they had and they dove headfirst into real estate. Really going to enjoy this show today. Fast forward to the current day, and Ben now holds $200 million of assets under management with his company, Lionheart Development. And prior to real estate, Ben spent the first part of his career coaching college basketball. Super interesting career. And the skills he learned with that profession has helped propel him into the real estate industry. So with that, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me, man. We're really excited to get into some real estate talk.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks again for joining us. And, Ben, right off the bat, I'd love for you to start off and give our listeners some information about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Oh, wow. So as you said earlier, coming out of university, all I wanted to do was coach. Coaching goes back in my family background. My father coached for 30 years, and all I wanted to do was, I wasn't as good as a basketball player as my older brother. He took it over professionally overseas, and my kind of career stopped after 2 years of college, So what do they say? Those who can't play, teach. So I got into it right away, coaching and working with my dad. And the love of coaching became all encompassing in my life. And it went from just the X's and O's are great and they're fun to do, but it was really helping these student athletes start off as, I always told people that they came through my doors as boys and they left as men. So I really enjoyed that process of taking them through that transition. And it was really cool to see that whole process move. I call it the drug. It's really addictive. It's really hard to get out of. So when I left the US and came back to Canada, we don't pay our coaches in Canada very much, right? So the contracts were far and few between lucrative, that's for sure. So I was, hanging on by a thread financially, and came to the point where I had a kind of a run-in with our upper administration at the institution I was at, and we decided to part ways. So I was quite lost after that and looking for, what do I do next? So I moved back at 35 years old, I moved back into my parents' basement. Thank God for my parents. If not, I would have been sleeping in a 1981 Ford F-150 truck. The trucks were built well back then. So, it was pure steel, very heavy. But I sold everything I had. I was out west at the time and moved back to Toronto area and my parents' basement, and was really lost doing a sales job. Met my wife, and then at the time, girlfriend, and went through that whole process. And she literally took me out of the dark ages and brought me into an area of my life where I was excited for the first time in a couple of years. And we ended up kind of going to a real estate 2-hour event, and we sat down, and I wanted to leave because I thought it was a network marketing situation. I'm like, I don't want to deal with this. All my friends try to pull me into this stuff. I don't want to do it. So she made me stay. And from there, we went to a 3-day course and started learning the power of leverage. And that helped us purchase duplex, triplex, fourplex, and build our rental portfolio from essentially nothing. So 2015, living in my parents' basement, no vehicle, couldn't afford a car payment, couldn't afford anything, to, around 2019, where we start to see a little bit more gains. And then to today, where we now have 3 major developments encompassing over $200 million under management.
Wow, what a story. I mean, just to go from being a college basketball coach, then essentially losing everything and kind of starting over, and then to go to that real estate event, start learning, meet your future spouse, and dive into, real estate investing. That's just phenomenal. How did that real estate event come up? What sparked you guys to go to that event that really changed everything for you?
My father being in the institutional, call it university basketball coach, we always saw the power of real estate because it was always, I knew what all of his players were paying. And when I got into it, I knew what all my players were paying rent. It was like, it's all started with a competitive advantage where I was like, okay, if I bought a house for my players, because in Canada, we don't offer full scholarships. So it was like, how do we really get to the top of the hill and stay there consistently? And it was like, well, if I bought a house for my players and charged them $200 a room a month rent, and it just covered the mortgage, we would be really successful because the players wouldn't have to go work jobs in the summer and do these different things. And they can focus on basketball. They can focus on school. And we got there. So when basketball ended, that knowledge of real estate never changed. It was always that I understood. So now it was, okay, now we can rent out 5 rooms, or we buy a duplex and we have 2 incomes coming in, right? And cash flow is $500 a month. If I get 5 of those, well, that's $2,500 a month. And then we can refi one of them every 5 years. And now all of a sudden I'm pulling out $40K tax free. Wow, that's more money than I ever had coaching for doing nothing, right? That's what they tell you. Doing nothing. That's what they tell you. It's never doing nothing. So I always knew the power of it. And then once I learned the power of leverage, how to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And once you get past 3, it's really taking 3 of those to get 3 more, right? So your scalability kind of just goes, and then it just like takes off. So I really loved that. I felt that it was very much like building a championship team. So puzzle pieces, right? Like this property will work, this one won't. Let's do this. I really enjoyed that. So once we got into it, my brain started dissecting it the way I would dissect watching film, or the way I would dissect a practice plan, or, different things. So it really became one, like my coaching brain and my real estate brain just kind of collided, and it spurred this to now that we have development. But it kind of took me through the stages, and it was really, I mean, if you had a scope to go in this crazy thing that was going on at the time, it would be unbelievable to watch everything firing and, go on different ways. But yeah, it's kind of, it was the only thing that I had. Like I said, in 2015, I was in a low place. I couldn't find anything that rivaled my passion for coaching, or rivaled basketball, or rivaled sports in general, until I fell into real estate. And it was in that 2-hour event that I was like, I can do this. The guys on stage talking to regular guys, and I'm like, I can do this. So as soon as that came into here, it was like, let's go. So, you go through these processes, and they're not cheap to go through, right? Like everybody's like, how did you do this? We didn't tell our family members anything that we were doing or the money that we put out. So we had got engaged in April of 2017, and we went to these events, and we had some money saved for our wedding. And I said, well, screw the wedding. Let's put this towards something that is going to be beneficial. However, we didn't realize we were going to lose our deposits on everything. So we kind of had to work some things around, but it was very, very enlightening. And we're like, okay, let's hit this full on. And I don't do anything half-assed. My wife calls it obsessive. Like my family is very obsessive over what we do, coaching, working out, whatever it may be. So when I hit this real estate possibility, I got obsessed, and our life completely changed. Like from the point where how we drove around streets, what we did, like our friends circle changed. My friends circle changed. Women, they keep their high school friends all the way through if they've never left the area, right? So, but man, I see time just kind of go like boom, 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 because we don't have to talk to our friends back from 20 years ago, and it's like we never left. So my friend circle significantly changed, and as I leveled up my friend circle, so did my business.
Well, there was a lot of good points you just shared there. I mean, you said, you kind of laughed at, they say, building passive income, doing nothing. And I'd agree with that. I mean, when you're buying rental real estate, especially if you're the active investor, you have to grind. There's work that you have to put in. There's time, there's energy, there's money. So passive income, unless you're passively investing with another group, there's certainly a lot of workload. And you said tax-free, that's a huge advantage of real estate, regardless of what avenue you get into. A lot of times this passive income coming off of the real estate can be tax-free because you have so many different tax advantages. You also shared power of leverage, leveraging, a loan, leveraging refinancing other deals, leveraging other people's money. There's all kinds of different leverage that you can utilize to push yourself forward and build that success. And then I love you said that you're obsessive at real estate investing. And I think whatever career path, whatever you're doing in life, if you can find that obsession and be obsessed about it and have that passion, you're just going to go so much further and get so much faster as well. Ben, what were some of the initial challenges in transitioning from rental real estate and your construction business to land development? Because I believe you did rentals for a while, you did your construction business, and then you shifted over to land development, correct?
Yeah. So in Ontario, Canada, we are very much like California and New York in terms of landlord laws. We got into development organically because we were going to build small apartment buildings, convert small and gain more doors so that we can get out of the day-to-day of managing tenants. So it was like, okay, we have to get to a certain number of doors so we can hire, he's created a property management company so I can hire one of my former players to be a property manager, right? So that's kind of how I was planning it and help them get into real estate and see the power of it. And then it was like the pandemic hit and we were like, okay, now we got to shift just a little bit here. People stopped paying rent. Our landlord tenant board said, yeah, that's fine. They don't have to pay rent. You can stay for another 12 months until we have a hearing. And I always say this, and this is just my opinion, but I feel like most of the times any building under 6 units, cash flow becomes a bit of a myth. And I say that because there's not enough economies of scale to support when something happens. Even when one tenant leaves, you're looking at nowadays, it's a $2,000 to $3,000 changeover, with how expensive paint is, having somebody to paint it, generally got to replace a stove. So you got to replace that. You want to have it tip top for the next tenant, and it becomes a grind. And what is your time worth to do those things? I always found that we projected cash flow, but at the end of the year, we didn't have any. Or at the end of the month, we didn't have any because it was always, well, we had an extra snowfall, so the plow guy charged an extra $200. Well, that right away eats into your cash flow. So I really caution people on running their numbers. Oh yeah, cash flow is this. And so we got to the point where if it doesn't cash flow a bigger number, we're not even going to touch it. And then that kind of portrayed us into, or kind of relayed us into getting out of the landlord game. I don't know about you, but I don't appreciate owning something and having somebody just abuse it with no recourse. I'm a big believer in tenants have rights. I think that it's important, but I also don't appreciate the fact that they don't have to pay rent and nothing happens. Like I can't go to a grocery store, fill up my cart and tell the cashier, yeah, I'll get you next month. I'll get caught up next month. It's essentially stealing. Like you're stealing living, right? And the hardest thing that I found is I'd walk into these apartments, people couldn't pay rent, but they had 72-inch TVs and, 2 Xboxes and 2 Mac computers. I'm like, that's $10,000 right there that you have sitting here, but you can't pay your $1,500 a month rent. So it was a hard thing for me to swallow. And finally we said, as the market kind of hit its peak, we're like, well, let's liquidate some things. We still have a couple, we have a short-term rental. We just sold a short-term rental, but it was a decision that we made that I felt like I was working 24 hours for free.
Makes total sense. And yeah, I can certainly relate to you when you're talking about tenants not paying rent. And that's something that we've personally shifted in our business. We're looking for properties in areas where the delinquency is super, super low. Like right now, we have a property that we're chasing where the delinquency is 0.5% over the last 12 months. So very low number of tenants that aren't paying their rent. Whereas we just looked at an asset and it was about 9% of the tenants. So if you have a 100-unit property, 9 of those tenants aren't paying the rent. And that's a property that we passed on because of that reason. So can certainly relate to that. And, I like that you said buildings under 6 units, cash flow becomes a myth. And that's something that I personally dealt with when we had our single family portfolio. We'd have to replace a roof and that would eat up the cash flow for a year or two. And it's crazy how quickly your cash flow can disappear unless you have economies of scale. So Ben, you working in land development now, tell me a little bit more of what type of land development you do and what the process looks like, what the timelines look like.
The timelines are fun. They're very long. So, so right now we have 2 condo developments going on downtown Hamilton, Ontario, which is 45 minutes from downtown Toronto, essentially by an hour. Let's call it an hour by transit, no traffic, you're going to hit it. But we've picked locations that are on transit lines because that's where our province is pushing for density. So we have an 8-story, 145 unit and a 10-story, 132 unit. And then we have a bit of a luxury townhouse condo development that we've also been working on for a couple of years. So kind of a mixture. And, we've dabbled. Do we keep one of the buildings as rentals and apartments? And then we go back to the fact that there's delinquency. If people are delinquent, you're not covering your mortgage. So we're going to keep them as condos, sell them. And if we're going to keep buildings, our mantra is we're going to do it down in the US in landlord-friendly eviction areas in terms of if you're not paying rent, you can change the locks in 3-4 days and you're gone. So one of the unique things, though, that we are doing, and I think we're pretty much in Canada anyways, we're first to the marketplace. We will be first to the marketplace, and that is with an expandable living system. So what we've done is we're creating, 350 to 400 square foot studio apartments, but they move. And it's not like a wall moves, but they act as 3 different rooms. So you're going to have a bedroom, living room, entertainment area, and you're also going to have a home office. How are you doing this? Well, it's with this system called the Ori Living System. And you're going to see like the beds will move up. It's like a Murphy bed on steroids, right? So you don't do anything but press a button. It goes up into a canopy there and a beautiful, very comfortable couch. It's not like an IKEA couch. It's a really nice, comfortable couch. Is built in to the system underneath. We have a entertainment center that will have your TV. You can have quite a big TV on it, and it will move and create a home office. When you get into these small units, that's always the major question is, where am I going to put all my stuff? Like, where am I going to put all my clothes? Where am I going to put all this? Like, if you have a young couple starting out, the most stuff they have are clothes. This closet can go out. You have both sides filled. It's a walk-in galley style closet. It's tons of storage. It's really impressive. And the one beautiful thing that I like about it is it can become barrier free. So we have certain codes for wheelchairs to get in around closets and get into different areas. You can set the depth on your specific digital meter that's there for the closet to open to accommodate a wheelchair going through, or the home office to accommodate a wheelchair coming in. It's really taken, I don't want to call them micro units because they're above 350 square feet. Below that, you can call them micro units, but they're functional spaces. And what it's allowing us to do is create a level of affordability for people to get into the market. And I'm a big believer that when you create housing, you create it at 5 different levels. So if you build a luxury home, somebody is moving up and it's a ripple effect and it opens up housing all the way up. If you create it at the beginning, you also now create rental space coming up above it. So everything's a ripple effect for when you can create housing. And our mandate is to create affordability for people to enter the marketplace.
Wow, that's incredible. I have never heard of that type of technology. I think you said it's expandable living space. How did you come across the technology, and has it been done anywhere else, in the US or in Canada? It sounds like you're the first to do it in Canada, but tell us a little more.
Yeah, so I came across it on social media, and then I reached out to the company and we started a bit of a partnership. So the company is called Ori Living. So, their engineering brains are going so many miles an hour, and this is what they came up with. And it's a fantastic product, but they're big on repurposed rentals. So they have a couple of buildings throughout the US. They did a huge conversion in Fort Worth, Texas. It's like 30% more floor space or 50% more floor space, 30% more rent per unit. So it really helps your bottom line. We are the first design build, I think. I'm pretty sure we're up there for a design build. A lot of these companies are doing these, but they're offering them as upgrades for condos. We're saying, no, we're not going to offer as upgrades. It's going to be built into the performer, to the price. And all of our bachelor units are outfitted with the 3 pieces, which is they call it the cloud bed, the entertainment center, which is the home office, and the walk-in closet. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, when I was coming out of school, if I could afford a place, it would have been a small condo bachelor. But nobody wants to really live in a bachelor apartment. Now, if I was a single dude by myself and this was on the market, I would have no problem doing this. I like the techie stuff. I think it's cool. It's cutting edge. That's part of the reason why I got so excited about it, is because being my competitive nature, I mean, I'm not competitive at all, but being the type of guy I am, taking this product in Canada to be mainstream market, I'm super excited about. And we have a bunch of other projects in the pipeline that we're considering with this. So it's really kind of changed the way I look at parcels of land, the way I look at assemblies, the way I look at the development. Can we implement this? Because everybody talks about the housing crisis in North America. Listen, it's simple economics. It's supply and demand. Up here in Canada, we've been mandated to build 3.5 million homes by 2030. That is 1,600 homes a day. That's not happening.
Yeah, that is a ton of units to put online.
Yeah. People don't realize, like, it's a lot, and that's not happening. So, with the cost of construction and the cost of everything, we're not hitting those numbers. We need to be able to do something that can contribute to that. And this is our contribution. It's like, I can allow somebody to get into the marketplace, create more rentals, and investors eat these up too. Like, they will turn them into rentals because they can get more money out of them. Oh, I'm not going to rent this as a bachelor. It's actually a 3 functioning system. So I'm going to get 30% more rent, right? So we're excited about it.
What an exciting technology. That's amazing. I appreciate you sharing that. And, shifting back to land development. So it sounds like you take a look at the land and you really figure out what the best purpose of it. How do you go about that? How do you determine the highest and best use of a piece of land that you're considering purchasing?
You have to have your parameters, right? And what you just said, highest and best use, is something that is always there. Like, any conversation with my team that we're having is, what is the highest and best use of this property? I don't, when I was coaching, I was a great offensive coach. My team scored a lot. We put the ball in the basket. I wasn't the best defensive coach. So I hired a good assistant coach who was defensive minded. I do the same thing in real estate. I hire the urban planners, the land use lawyers, the architects to really tell me what we can actually do here, what the best path of least resistance. If we want to fight a little bit, what are we going to get? And I think those 2 comments are important because they directly affect your timeline. Never trust a realtor when they tell you, oh, it'll take you 6 months to get this rezoned. Not going to happen. Right? They don't care where you are. Do not count on that. It may happen. And if it does, fantastic. But the developments that we are doing, everybody wants to make a comment on it. Everybody needs to justify their job once it gets put into the city. And it takes 6 months to get your proposal together, like from planning, from landscaping to architecture to your elevations. Like, it's not just, oh yeah, guys, do this plan, let's get it into the city. That's not how it works. So you really got to be conscious of take your experiences from other properties and apply them to the properties you're looking at. And, we always look at transit lines. Like, are we close to transit? When we're doing buildings, are we close to transit? It's very important that you are on a bus line, or you're on a LRT line, light rail transit, or you're close to a commuter train. So both of our projects right now, one is right next to the commuter train station, and that train will be going every 30 minutes. It's great. It's fantastic. So we can sell that. The LRT, the other building, it's a little bit different demographic. It's on the LRT line. So it's people working in our specific city, going up and down. We also look at, as the age old saying, we look at a Starbucks. We look at a Walmart. We look at, depending on the demographic we're going at, where we're building, we look at what is going there. What are the plans? What's being built in that area? What are the infrastructure growth plans from a commercial standpoint, from an industrial standpoint? So we really try to have a certain set of parameters before we even start touching properties or looking at them, right? So, my team and I would probably go over in the course of 2 weeks. Once a week, we have a bit of a powwow saying, got any properties on the go? Guys will throw it my way. We look at it. This one's no good. This one's good. Find out why, find out more, go here and there. And sometimes you just get lucky and sometimes you don't.
And speaking more on that, getting lucky and not getting lucky, on our side, we'd love to mitigate risk wherever we can. What are some ways that you mitigate risk with land development upfront?
Having your team in place and being able to work with the municipality. That's your first mitigation there. We've made mistakes and it's cost us months, cost us a year on a property, right? We got a little bit greedy. You go to a restaurant and your eyes are bigger than your stomach. That's kind of what happened with one of our assemblies. And now it's going to turn out great, but at the time it didn't. So you have to have a really good team in place I know everybody talks about build your team, build your team, build your team. But the first point of mitigating risk is you have to have a great relationship. We call them up here urban planners. Down in the US, I've known down in the state of Florida, they're land use lawyers. Every area has a different kind of terminology for it. But I could pick up the phone and call my planner and ask him, is this property something we can go or not? One time I asked him, oh, this would be a fantastic project. And I said, is it viable? Well, you're going to have a lot of fight with the city. Okay, that's not something I want to do right now, right? Understanding your construction costs is a major thing. So you guys would be in a similar climate market as what we're in Minneapolis as we are here in Hamilton. And we have to do underground parking. When we build a building, there's not enough space to do above ground, nor do people want above ground parking. They want underground because it protects them from the elements. They don't have to go outside in the freezing cold. It's a selling feature. So that comes with a major development cost. It comes with a major construction cost. So you have to understand how much it costs to go down and how far you need to go down in order to how far you can go up. Every time we have a new conversation about a property, I have to act as a sponge. Thank God for AI note taking. It's made things very easy to go back and check on meetings because we're able to kind of go through some of the comments that we had on specific things because I get excited and your brain starts going, oh yeah, we can make this, and this. And we have our napkin math that, oh, this is going to produce this return. This is worth going, digging down a little bit deeper. But in terms of mitigating risk, it's all about experiences and understanding what failed and writing that down and keeping that in a notebook of failures. And I try not to look at it because it's depressing, but it's good when we're kind of looking at a new project and saying that, yeah, this area, we know the soil is very, very bad. So we know that we're going to have to dig down to bedrock or put some type of support, and that's going to cost us A, and then we have to do the waterproofing, and that's going to cost us B. So when you know some of those things after doing one or two, you start to become more efficient. And I think you look at the big development companies, and they all started out how we start out here at Lionheart. It's a process, right? And the goal is to become that big where, I'm not trying to syndicate deals and where we have our own funding for acquisitions and these different things. So it's being able to lean on your required professionals to help you when you're starting out to gain your expertise, that you don't have to make a $2,500 phone call to an architect, say, give me a high level of how many units I can get here.
Great pointers there. I mean, have a great team put together, regardless of what arena of real estate you're in. That is absolutely crucial. I think back to when we added some units in Nashville, the first time going through it, we did a lot of it ourselves and it took months to get it done. Whereas the second time around, we used someone to expedite the permitting process and it literally shaved off months off the process. Yeah. So if you can fine tune your team, use other individuals that have went through the process before, to gain some knowledge from. I mean, that's going to quicken your process and save you so much money. Like you said, understand your construction costs. This is massive, especially with inflation, ticking up so much over the years. Just make sure that you're giving yourself some cushion and that you fully understand what you need to put into the project. I also love that you mentioned note taking during meetings and looking back at those notes because you get excited and sometimes you forget some of the items that were talked about, some of the action items. So make sure you have someone taking notes, or even AI systems like Otter AI can be great to utilize if you don't have someone on your team taking manual notes. And then you said understand what you failed from and learn from it. I love that you have that failure notebook. I'm going to have to implement that. I mean, that's a great idea because a lot of times you can fail at something and you think you're going to remember it for eternity, but sometimes you forget and you make that failure again. So if you can eliminate that from happening again, that's going to save you a lot of headaches, a lot of money, and a lot of stress. So
I think the failure part it's very personal because every time that something happens, it affects you differently. And my failure might not be your failure. So, I encourage people to share things out there, but your failure book, that's your intellectual property because realistically, that's how you succeed. And don't share that with people because they don't deserve that, because that failure that you went through is painful. And you can share how you got through it and you can share some different parts of it. But when we talk about a why, like my why is very dark. I don't tell people my why. It drives me. I have 2 little boys now. And when I started, I didn't have 2 boys. So my why wasn't them. The proverbial, oh yeah, I want to have my kids have more opportunity. No, they're going to have to work for their opportunity. If you give them that opportunity, they're not going to want it. They're not going to learn from it. You got to raise beasts in this world. And by giving them things, they're not going to be those guys you need them to be. So keep those failures close to your heart, because in the dark days of winter, right, those are, you open that up. You're like, I got through that. It also works as a motivator. Not only is it just educational, it also like, oh yeah, it's never as bad as it seems, and it's never as good as it seems. So, it's important to keep that in perspective. And my failure book really allows me to kind of keep it in perspective.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned that, don't give your kids everything, make them work for it. I was actually just at a real estate event out in Los Angeles recently, and I was talking to very well-known multifamily investors, probably one of the most well-known in the US. And he was just chatting about how after his son got done with college, he made him go out and work for a company for a couple of years before he joined his company, because he didn't want him to step in and feel like he deserved everything. Like, it was just on the plate for him. And I talked to his son and to him, and they both said, it was such a great idea, and it did a lot for them. So completely agree with that. Shifting the talk a little bit, I want to shift back to technology, because I know you're implementing, technology. We talked about the flexible spaces. Any other technology that you see changing the way that we utilize space, or that we utilize, land development currently at all, Ben?
I mean, I have my ideas. I feel like we're on a cusp of crazy robotics to help construction costs. In the US and Canada, we're at a major labor shortage, and it's not going to get any better. The southern US is a little bit different, but the northern states and Canada, we don't have the skilled immigration coming in like we used to. So we're having, the Portuguese, the Greeks, the Italians, who really made up our masonry, our tile work industry, our concrete, they're retiring. And for every person who retires, there's one filling that void. And it doesn't matter if you're working on condo buildings or you're retiling bathrooms. We're still losing skilled workers at a high rate. If somebody doesn't create robotics to take over these industries, we are going to be very, very hard pressed to build anything in the next 20 to 30 years. So it's a concern as a developer for sure, because I think that we're at a point of, where's the industry going to go? We don't have mason guys. It's expensive because there's one or two in our area who specialize in the high-rise buildings doing masonry work. I'm just using masonry as an example, but every industry is losing skilled laborers at a high rate, and we're not replacing them. It's a very big concern. Technology has to jump in and save that industry, or people's homes and houses won't be built.
Definitely. Major concern. And I actually saw a prefabricated apartment complex going up in China the other day online. And I thought that was super interesting, prefabbing the units in a factory. You come out and you install them. And I think they constructed, it was like an 80-story building, in a 30-day period. It was super quick. And who knows how durable it was, what the quality is like. But
I don't know if I'd want to be on the 80th floor of that.
Down the pipeline eventually.
Yeah, totally. We're looking at systems with bathrooms, like prefab bathrooms, just like that. It's like a plop it in and play. Anything to mitigate the construction costs. Realistically, they're so high that you got to be able to do some different things. Prefab kitchens, prefab bathrooms, those things that we're not having people come in and have to install all these different things. But yeah, I can see, you look at the tiny home industry, it's moving that direction where it just expands, right? The whole thing expands like a trailer, it just expands, right? So we're not far away from that, implementing that type of technology. I think that if we don't, we're going to be in some serious trouble from basically a continent in terms of housing being built. So
definitely major shortage out there. Shifting a little bit more, Ben, you have, I believe, a couple of children, your wife. How do you strike a balance between growing your business? You have a solid, nice sized business now, and ensuring that you have quality time with your loved ones at home?
I have no idea. It just happens. No, my wife is very good. So she's really good at keeping me grounded. When I'm home, I try to be home. When we got out of the landlord game, we left the 18-hour days. The nice thing that the people that we are dealing with work 9 to 5. So you're able to have a bit more of a life balance. But I think I could tell you with a toddler and a 1-year-old, there's no such thing as balance because every day is different. But weekends, I try to strictly make it family. And if I do work, it's before the kids wake up in the morning. One thing that has really changed in my life in the last 2 years is my bedtime. Everybody wants to talk about this great morning routine that they have. your body needs sleep. So if you can get up early and do work, that's fantastic. But I found that if you don't go to bed at a decent time, your next day is a nightmare. At some point of the day, you're going to wish I went to bed earlier. I have an addictive personality, as we've talked about being obsessive with things. So that goes no different for watching a TV show. I made the conscious decision in May of last year, 2023, to not watch TV during the week. And there's times where that rule gets broken. If my wife is like, just watch this with me, and I'll watch an episode of something, but one episode, then I'm out the door. It's so easy now to binge watch and throw away 3 or 4 hours of your life and then suffer for it the next day. And I don't mean you should be doing work instead of watching TV. I think everybody needs something in their life, a release or whatever. But for me, I know that if I watch 2 episodes of a show and all of a sudden now it's 10:30, we talk about routines. My wife will always make fun of me. I have a crazy bedtime routine. I got to shower, a couple other things in order for me to actually have a good sleep. So by the time I get into bed and ready to sleep, it's 11 o'clock. And now, I'm trying to get up at 5. That doesn't work. And then you sleep until 6 and you're just not getting a good jump on the day. So I really tell people that abandon this notion of your morning routine. You need to wait the 5 a.m. club. You got to wake up and do this, this, and this. That is fantastic. You need to eventually get there. But in order to get there first is you have to change your bedtime routine, and you got to start going to bed early. And so what we found as a family is that as a result, so we also have 2 big dogs. We have 2 kids and 2 big dogs that need to be walked. Well, my wife's not walking them. So most of the time, 90% of the time, it's me, and it's after one of the kids goes down. So we're like, dinner time's a chaos. We get the first kid down. I'm out the door with the dogs, come back, we get the second kid down. And it's like, we don't want to talk to, like, we want to talk to each other. We try to, but sometimes it's like, I need my space. Right. So, some nights we really try to take one day a week and that we have us, just us. So we're still working on that. It's still hard to do, but it's important that you spend at least a couple hours a week with your spouse with nobody involved. So I always looked at it as, like, my coaching perspective, my defensive philosophy had to flow into my offensive philosophy because that was the most important thing. So your mornings are very important, but if your night doesn't flow into your morning and contradicts it, you're not going to be successful. And I always found that in coaching, that if we were helping all over the floor, then we were out of position to run our lanes offensively, right? Whereas if we just stuck with our man and stayed there and boxed out and got a rebound, forced a shot, got a rebound, we can get on our lanes and put a ball in the basket. Go to bed early, wake up early, start your day.
Makes total sense. And that's interesting because I always had the notion, if I'm in bed 7 hours, I'm good to go. So I'd set my alarm 7 hours on the dot from when I got into bed. And I recently bought a Whoop watch. So it monitors your sleep habits, monitors your heart rate, monitors your recovery. And what I noticed is there was probably a good solid hour, if not more, during the night where I wasn't sleeping. I was waking up. And then you look at your REM sleep and your deep sleep, and it's a lot lower than you think. And it also monitors your recovery. And I looked at my recovery back then, and it was subpar, whereas now I try to get 8.5 hours or so of sleep a night. And it has made a drastic difference how good I feel in the morning and how productive I can be that next day. So I love that you mentioned that. Also, you mentioned time for you and your spouse during the week. I think everyone can work on that. Everyone can become better at that. It's something that we've implemented as well. And, we've seen a lot of benefits from it. So if you get the chance, cut out the TV, cut out some of that crud and spend some time actually talking to your spouse, talking to your kids, playing games, getting outside. All of that stuff is going to be so much more beneficial than tuning into Netflix or something like that. So Ben, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Before we wrap up, I just have one more question. Any advice for individuals looking to pivot in their careers or those looking to dive into real estate investing?
Don't be scared. Fear of the unknown. Fear is a cage. Everything, and I can tell you this by starting a whole new life at 35 years old, is it scary? 100%. And every time we did a deal, when we pivoted from multifamily to full-on development to sell, was it scary? Yeah, it's still scary. When you have investors, it's still scary. And it should be. Enjoy the butterflies. You're not anxious. It's just life. That's what's gonna get you there. And if you have those, it means you care. But don't be afraid to fail. But it's so funny that everybody's like, don't be afraid to fail. Well, it's easier to say that than actually do it. So I like to say, don't be afraid to fail, but fear failure. So what I mean by that is you don't want to fail, but it's a necessary stepping stone. And if you understand that and you can learn from it and get better, then it's never a failure. It's not a mistake. It's just a learning opportunity. No matter what career you're in, no matter if you're raising kids or dogs or just solo or you're in a relationship, don't be afraid of the next day. Don't be afraid of what's coming down the pipe, because you deserve what you put in. And if you can dream it, you can do it. If you want to better your life, you got to take some risks.
Well, Ben, thanks so much for coming on the show. Truly appreciated it. A lot of great advice. If our listeners want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how could they go about doing that?
The best way really is on Instagram, and my handle is Coach Ben Julius. LinkedIn is Ben Julius. Our website is lionheartdevelopment.co. All my personal information is on there as well. And I'm always open to a phone call, a message. I love to talk. You can tell I like the sound of my own voice. So it never hurts to have a conversation with anybody. So Mike, I want to say thank you for having me on. It's been a great hour of conversation.
Thanks again, Ben.